Hello viewers, welcome to my YouTube channel. Get ready for heart-touching stories. Don't forget to subscribe and let's begin.
The morning of the regional science fair, my mother stood in the doorway of my bedroom with her arms crossed and her lips pressed into that thin, bloodless line I had learned to fear. Behind her, my father sat at the kitchen table pretending to read the newspaper, though I could see his eyes weren't moving across the page. My older brother Darian leaned against the wall in the hallway, picking at his thumbnail, not looking at me. "Just don't embarrass us," my mother said. "Not good luck. Not we're proud of you." Just that, a warning. A fence. I was 16 years old and I had spent 11 months building something I believed in completely. A water filtration prototype designed specifically for low-income rural communities, built from parts I had sourced at hardware surplus stores and paid for with money I made tutoring neighborhood kids in math. I had tested it 47 times. I had filled 3 spiral notebooks with data. I had read peer-reviewed papers on cholera outbreaks and waterborne pathogens until the words blurred in front of my eyes at 2 in the morning. But none of that mattered to my family. What mattered was appearances. We were a family shaped by silence and reputation. My grandfather had immigrated from Eritrea in the late 1970s and built a small but respected name in our city through decades of discipline, frugality, and an almost militant commitment to never showing weakness in public. That value had passed through my father like water through stone, slow, steady, wearing everything smooth. Emotion was indulgence. Vulnerability was invitation for disaster. You kept your chin up and your business private, and you did not under any circumstances make a spectacle of yourself. The science fair in their minds was already a risk. You could have entered the math competition, my father had said months earlier when I first told them what I was doing. Math you're good at. This project thing you'll be standing there in front of strangers talking. I know how to talk, I said. He looked at me over the top of his glasses. That's not what I mean. I understood exactly what he meant. Math competitions happened in quiet rooms with answer sheets. Science fairs happened in gymnasiums with judges walking up and down the aisles asking questions out loud in front of everyone. There was nowhere to hide. And in my family's philosophy, if there was nowhere to hide, you simply did not go, but I went anyway. I had registered myself, taken the bus to the supplier 3 towns over to pick up the final components, and soldered the last connection in my project at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday while everyone else in the house was asleep. When the acceptance letter came confirming my slot, I put it in my backpack and didn't mention it at dinner. They found out eventually. Mrs. Petrakis, my science teacher, had called to congratulate them. My mother received the call and came to my room afterward with that look I knew so well, and all she said was, "Don't humiliate us." As if those were the only 2 outcomes, winning without incident or humiliation. There was no version of events in which showing up was enough. The gymnasium at Fairfield Community College smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. Rows of folding tables stretched from wall to wall, each one hosting a project draped in trifold poster boards. Most of the other participants were from larger schools. I counted 4 private school uniforms in the first row alone. Their displays were laminated and color-coordinated, with printed photographs and typography that looked professionally designed. A girl 2 tables down had what appeared to be a working miniature wind turbine. I set up my filtration prototype and stood back to look at it. It was not beautiful. The housing was made from PVC pipe and reclaimed plastic tubing. The collection basin was a modified 5-gallon bucket. Every joint had been sealed by hand, and you could see the uneven lines of the epoxy if you looked closely. It worked. I knew it worked. I had the data, but standing in that room, surrounded by glossy displays and children of professionals, I felt the first tremor of doubt. My family had not come to watch me set up. They had agreed reluctantly to attend the afternoon awards ceremony, and only because my brother had pointed out that not showing up at all would look worse than showing up and losing. Even their attendance was a calculation. The morning judging began at 9. Judges walked through in pairs, stopping at each table, asking questions, making notes on their clipboards. When the first pair reached me, I straightened my back and began my presentation. I told them about the communities I had researched, rural counties where well water contamination was a documented public health issue, where residents either couldn't afford commercial filtration systems or lived too far from municipal infrastructure to access treated water. I told them how I had designed the prototype to be built for under $60 using materials available at any hardware store. I explained the filtration layers: coarse gravel, fine sand, activated charcoal, a biological layer cultured from naturally occurring beneficial bacteria. I showed them my 47 test results. I showed them the turbidity readings before and after. I showed them the bacterial colony counts. One of the judges, a heavy-set man with a salt and pepper beard and reading glasses hanging from a lanyard, leaned in to look at my data tables. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he asked me 3 questions in rapid succession. What was my control variable? How had I accounted for mineral contamination? Had I considered the scalability of the biological culture component? I answered all 3. The second judge, a younger woman with a green blazer, wrote something on her clipboard. They moved on. I exhaled. The afternoon session was different. This was when the senior judges came through, the ones whose decisions actually counted toward the regional awards. There were 3 of them, and they moved as a group, spending longer at each table asking harder questions. I watched them work their way down the row. They spent almost 12 minutes at the wind turbine girls' table. They spent 8 minutes at a project on antibiotic-resistant bacteria. They were thorough, professional, unhurried. My family had arrived by then and were sitting in the bleachers along the far wall, my mother in her good coat, my father with his hands folded in his lap, Darian scrolling his phone. They were not watching me. They were watching the space between themselves and everyone else, calculating the distance, making sure it was sufficient. When the senior judges reached my table, the lead judge was a woman named Dr. Amara Osai. I didn't know her name then, I would learn it later. She was tall, probably in her mid-50s, with close-cropped natural hair and the precise, unhurried bearing of someone who had spent decades making important decisions. She read my display board without speaking. She looked at the prototype. She picked up my data notebook, the actual notebook, handwritten, coffee-stained, dog-eared, and paged through it slowly. Then she looked up at me. Walk me through the biological culture layer, she said. How did you develop it? I explained. She asked a follow-up. I answered. She asked another. I answered that too. We went back and forth for what felt like a long time. I lost track of it. She was not testing me the way a teacher tests a student looking for a specific right answer. She was actually curious. She was engaging with the work. At some point I became aware that the other two senior judges had stopped taking notes and were just listening. When I finished explaining my methodology for the bacterial culture, Dr. Osai was quiet for a moment. Then she said, have you looked at similar work being done at the university level? Yes, I said. There's a research group at MIT and one in the Netherlands. The Dutch model uses a similar multi-layer approach but operates at a scale of about 1,000 liters per day. Mine is about 40. I was trying to optimize for portability and low cost over volume. She nodded slowly. Why? It was such a simple question. Why? Because the problem I was trying to solve isn't in a place that can afford the Dutch model, I said. The people who need this the most have the least access to the expensive version. So I didn't want to make a smaller version of something big. I wanted to make something designed from the beginning to be cheap and simple enough that someone could build it in their garage with instructions off a single sheet of paper. Dr. Osai looked at me for another moment. Then she did something I was not expecting. She smiled, not the polite, professional smile of a judge completing her rounds, but a real one, the kind that takes over a person's face before they've decided whether to let it. She wrote something on her clipboard, thanked me, and moved to the next table. I did not tell my family any of this. During the break between judging and awards, I sat with them in the bleachers and ate the sandwich my mother had packed, and nobody asked me how it had gone. My father made a comment about the traffic on the way home. My brother found a friend from school and disappeared for 20 minutes. My mother straightened the collar of my jacket and told me to sit up straight. I sat up straight. The awards ceremony was held at 3 in the afternoon. The participants filed back to stand near their tables while the organizing committee set up a podium. Various certificates were handed out for participation and achievement in specific categories. Third place was announced. Second place was announced. Then the MC said, before we announce the regional first place winner, we have an addition to our program this year. Dr. Amara Osai, chair of our senior judging panel, has asked to say a few words. A murmur moved through the room. This apparently was unusual. I saw other participants exchange glances. Dr. Osai walked to the podium. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at the room with the calm of someone completely at home in front of an audience. Every year, she said, we see impressive work at this fair, polished work, well-funded work, work that demonstrates access to resources and excellent preparation, and that work deserves recognition. She paused. But occasionally, not every year, not even most years, we encounter something different. We encounter a project that demonstrates not just intelligence or preparation, but genuine original thinking. A project where someone has identified a real problem in the real world and spent real time trying to solve it, not because it would look good on a form, but because they actually cared about the answer. I was looking at my hands. This year's first place winner built a water filtration prototype designed for low-income rural communities, achievable at under $60 in materials. They conducted 47 independent tests, maintained meticulous handwritten documentation, and demonstrated a depth of understanding in conversation with our panel that I have rarely encountered at any level of competition. I was still looking at my hands. What struck us most was not the technical execution, though it was excellent, it was the design philosophy. This young scientist made a deliberate choice to optimize for accessibility over performance. That is not a simple or obvious decision. That is a values-based engineering choice, and it reflects exactly the kind of thinking we need more of in science. She looked up from her notes, and then she walked not to the podium microphone, not toward the other judges, but directly toward me. Straight across the gymnasium floor between the tables and the clusters of students in a room that had gone completely quiet, she stopped in front of my table. She extended her hand. Congratulations, she said. First place. I shook her hand. I said thank you. I heard applause begin behind me, building slowly, and then all at once. I heard my name announced from the podium. Someone handed me a ribbon and an envelope and a trophy that was heavier than I expected. And then I looked up at the bleachers. My father was on his feet. He was not a man who stood up quickly for anything, but he was standing and his hands were together, and his jaw was working in the way it did when he was trying to contain something too large for his expression. My brother had stopped scrolling his phone. He was staring at me with an open mouth, and then he started clapping and kept clapping long after most of the room had stopped. My mother had her hand over her mouth. Her eyes were full. She was not a crier. I had seen her cry twice in my life, once at her father's funeral and once when Darian had his accident on his bike and we didn't know for an hour whether anything was broken. She cried at the things that mattered most, the things too big to manage with composure. She was crying now. After the ceremony, after the photographs and the conversation with Dr. Ose about research mentorship programs and university outreach, after the other participants had cleared out and the tables were being folded up, my family found me near the exit. My father put his hand on the back of my neck, a gesture he almost never made, a holdover from something older and softer than the man he had taught himself to be. He didn't say much. He said, "You did a good thing." In his language, in the language of who he was, that was everything. My mother hugged me. Long, tight, the kind of hug that says things words can't reach. When she pulled back, she looked at my face and then she said something I had not heard her say in years. "I'm sorry, I should have said good luck this morning." I told her it was okay. She shook her head. "No, it wasn't. You deserved better than what I said." She glanced down at the ribbon in my hand. "You built something that helps people. I should have known. I did know." Her voice caught. "I was afraid for you." I understood then what the warning had really been. Don't humiliate us had never been about arrogance or indifference. It had been about love in its most tangled, fearful form, the love of people who have known what it costs to be exposed, to be seen and found wanting. They had tried to protect me the only way they knew how, by keeping expectations low, by keeping the perimeter small, but I had needed something bigger than their fear. I went on to the state competition that spring. I didn't win. A junior from a university-affiliated magnet school took first with a machine learning project on early cancer detection. But I placed third, and a professor from the state's engineering department reached out afterward about a summer research program. The prototype is still on my desk. I've refined it 6 times since then. The latest version runs at 62 liters per day, costs $44 in materials, and takes about 4 hours to assemble with no special tools. I wrote the instructions on a single sheet of paper front and back with diagrams, just like I always planned. My mother has the original ribbon framed in the hallway. She hung it herself without asking anyone on a Tuesday evening when I came home from school. I walked past it the first time without noticing. The second time I stopped. I stood there for a while looking at it. It didn't say "don't humiliate us." It didn't need to say anything at all.